Life has a strange way of unfolding, doesn't it? Here I am, Jacob Brown, a 47-year-old man who once thought he had life all figured out. Married for 23 years to Linda, my rock, my best friend, the woman who's been with me through thick and thin. Together, we raised our daughter, Joanna, now 20, a bright young woman who's ready to embark on a new chapter of her own life. She's dating Mike, a decent young man, and they're already talking about marriage. I have mixed feelings about that, proud, but also a bit reluctant to let my little girl go. I'm a partner in Brown & Jones Accounting, a firm I co-founded with my college buddy, Logan Jones. Logan is a character, to say the least. Back in college, he was the life of the party, the guy everyone wanted to be around. He hasn't changed much, still unmarried, still a womanizer. Sometimes I wonder how he keeps up with it all, juggling his extracurricular activities while helping run a multi-million-dollar firm. I guess that's Logan for you. Charming, brilliant, and maddeningly irresponsible at times. We built this firm from the ground up, starting in a cramped office with a couple of desks and big dreams. Those days were tough but exhilarating. We'd work long hours, fueled by cheap coffee and the kind of youthful ambition that makes you believe anything is possible. And now, here we are, managing a business that serves high-profile clients and brings in millions annually. It's surreal, really. But success comes with its own set of challenges. Logan and I often clash, not about the work itself, because we're both good at what we do, but about his lifestyle. I worry that one day his antics could tarnish the reputation we've worked so hard to build. I've tried talking to him about it, but he brushes it off, laughing, saying, "Relax, Jake. Life's too short to stress about what people think." Maybe he's right, but I can't help feeling responsible for more than just the bottom line. At home, things are quieter now. Linda and I have more time to ourselves since Joanna moved out for college, though she visits often. It's strange, the shift from being hands-on parents to just being us again. Linda's my anchor, the one who keeps me grounded when work gets overwhelming. She's also the one who reminds me that Joanna's not a little girl anymore, that she has to make her own decisions, including her choice to marry Mike. It started as a joke, just an offhand comment during a meeting with one of our clients, Alistair. Alistair's a brilliant guy, though a bit of an oddball, the kind of person you'd expect to see in some sci-fi movie hacking into a government database. He works on classified tech for the U.S. military and Secret Service, designing software that can break into systems most of us can't even comprehend. That day, Alistair was explaining his latest creation, a program capable of hacking into a phone, copying its data, and even tapping into real-time calls. It was both fascinating and terrifying. I remember leaning back in my chair, half joking as I said, "Well, if it's that good, why don't you hack into my wife's phone? Let's see what Linda's talking about." Alistair looked at me for a second, smirked, and then said, "All right, let's do it." I laughed nervously, but before I could object or clarify that I wasn't serious, he was already at work. He asked for Linda's phone number, and I, still thinking it was all just a harmless prank, gave it to him. Within minutes, he had her phone hacked. "Here," he said, handing me a pair of headphones. "She's on a call right now." I froze for a moment. This was real. The rational part of me screamed to stop this nonsense, but curiosity won. I put on the headphones, my heart pounding in my chest, and listened. At first, I thought the conversation was innocent. Linda was talking to Logan, my business partner and supposed friend. She mentioned Joanna's upcoming wedding, saying it was scheduled for the 20th of next month. I felt a flicker of pride. It's not every day your daughter gets married. But then, her tone shifted, and her next words hit me like a freight train. "Logan, you know she's your daughter." My breath caught in my throat. Did I hear that right? I strained to listen as they both laughed, the sound twisting like a knife in my chest. "Well," Logan said, his voice dripping with mockery, "guess I got the best of both worlds. Made you mine and got that idiot to foot the bill for 20 years. The casual cruelty in his words made my stomach churn. My mind raced, trying to piece it together. Joanna, my Joanna, wasn't mine? Logan, the man I trusted, had been with Linda behind my back? And worse, they'd been laughing about it, mocking me, turning my life into some sick joke. "Once Jacob pays for the wedding, I'll file for divorce," Linda continued, her tone as cold as ice. "Oh, and Joanna wants you to give her away. After all, you're her real father." I couldn't breathe. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear the rest of their conversation. Divorce? She'd been planning this all along, using me as a means to an end, a wallet to fund her perfect little fantasy. And Joanna? She knew? Had she been in on this? The thought made my hands shake. I couldn't believe the betrayal, the lies, the manipulation, the utter disregard for everything we'd built together. I pulled off the headphones and sat in stunned silence, the weight of what I'd just heard pressing down on me like a lead blanket. My mind replayed the moments of our life together, searching for signs I might have missed. The late nights, the excuses, the subtle changes in behavior. It was all so clear now, and yet I'd been blind to it for years. Logan, my friend, my partner, the man who helped me build a life and a business, had been the one to destroy it all. And Linda, she wasn't the woman I thought I married. She was a stranger now, someone capable of such cold-hearted betrayal. I felt a mix of emotions: rage, sadness, humiliation, and above all, heartbreak. My life, my family, my daughter. None of it was what I thought it was. And now, I had to decide what to do next. But one thing was certain: this betrayal wouldn't go unanswered. The shock was still settling, but I didn't have the luxury of breaking down. Not yet. The betrayal was too fresh, the pain too raw. But above all that, a cold, calculated rage began to take shape. This wasn't the time for tears or grief. This was the time for action. Alistair sat across from me, his eyes fixed on mine, as if he understood exactly what I was feeling. He didn't ask questions, didn't press for details. Maybe it was because he'd been through something similar. His own divorce had left scars I could see in his demeanor. Or maybe he just knew when a man needed to act instead of talk. "I'll help you," he said, his voice steady, carrying the weight of unspoken understanding. "You tell me what you need, Jacob. I'll get it done." I didn't hesitate. "I need their phones tapped, Logan's, Linda's, and Joanna's. I want every call recorded, every text intercepted. If they're hiding something, I want to know. All of it." Alistair nodded without blinking, already mentally mapping out what needed to be done. He leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming against the table. "Give me some time. I'll set it up. And as soon as I have something, I'll come to you." The weight of his promise settled in the room. It wasn't the kind of assurance you get from a casual friend or a business associate. This was different. Alistair wasn't just helping me out of obligation. He understood the fire burning inside me. I clenched my fists, staring at the floor, replaying the sickening conversation I'd overheard. Every word Linda and Logan had exchanged was etched into my mind, their laughter ringing in my ears like a cruel taunt. Joanna's involvement cut the deepest. Had she really chosen Logan, knowing the truth? Or was she just another pawn in their twisted game? I couldn't allow myself to think too far ahead. This wasn't about hurt feelings anymore. It was about uncovering the full scope of their betrayal and figuring out how to dismantle the lies they built their lives around. "Thank you," I said quietly, my voice tight. It was all I could manage, but Alistair didn't need more. He stood and placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "We'll get to the bottom of this. Just hold on." As he left, I sat there alone in the quiet office, my mind churning. I'd spent my life building something real, my family, my business, my relationships, and now I was watching it all unravel. But if they thought I'd sit back and let it happen, they were sorely mistaken. They'd made their moves. Now it was my turn. And I wasn't just going to play, I was going to win. The drive home felt like a blur. My mind was a tangled mess, replaying the conversation I overheard, thinking of all the years I'd been lied to. But I knew I couldn't let Linda sense anything, not yet. If she suspected I knew, it could ruin everything. When I walked through the door, Linda greeted me with her usual smile. It felt hollow now, a mask I couldn't unsee. She leaned in to kiss me, and I instinctively turned my head. "Sorry, I think I'm coming down with something," I mumbled, avoiding her gaze. "Oh," she said, pulling back slightly, her smile faltering. "You should rest then." I nodded, excusing myself to my library. That room had always been my sanctuary, the one place where I could think clearly. Tonight, it became my war room. Sitting at my desk, I opened my laptop. The soft glow of the screen lit up the dark room, and I started working. The first thing I did was draft a few documents, ones I'd been too naive to ever consider before. Separation agreements, prenuptial reviews, and detailed asset lists. I sent everything to our company lawyer, marking it urgent. He didn't need the full story yet, just that I needed these preparations in place. Next, I turned my attention to the wedding. Joanna's wedding. The one I'd been led to believe was my responsibility, my privilege as her father. I pulled up all the records, invoices, and receipts. Venue bookings, catering, dress fittings, it was all there. A staggering amount of money already spent, and more payments looming. Then came the harder part. I sat back and started calculating everything I'd invested in Joanna over the past 20 years. Her education, her medical bills, her birthdays, her vacations. All the things I'd gladly given, thinking she was my daughter. The total was staggering. But it wasn't just the money. It was the time, the love, the sleepless nights when she was sick, the pride I felt watching her grow up. And Linda, I gritted my teeth as I calculated how much I'd spent on her over the years. On her comforts, her dreams, her every whim. I'd spared no expense, thinking I was doing right by my wife. But now, every cent felt like a mockery, a reminder of the betrayal I'd unknowingly funded. By the time I was done, the numbers stared back at me, cold and unfeeling, the sum of a life built on lies. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. The rage was there, simmering, but so was something else, a deep, hollow sadness. This was my life, my family, and it had all been an illusion. I didn't go back to the bedroom that night. I couldn't bear to lie next to Linda, knowing what I now knew. Instead, I stayed in the library, my thoughts racing as I planned my next moves. If they thought they could play me, they had no idea what was coming. The game had changed, and this time, I wasn't playing to lose. Sitting across from Alistair, I felt a strange mix of anticipation and dread. This was it, the moment I would hear for myself the truth of what these people really thought of me. I wasn't sure if I was ready, but then again, no one's ever truly ready for betrayal. Alistair leaned forward, placing the small recorder on the table between us. He gave me a look, part reassurance, part warning, before pressing play. The first call crackled to life, and my heart sank immediately as Joanna's voice filled the room. "Logan, I've been thinking, I want you to walk me down the aisle," she said, her tone bright, almost cheerful. "You're my real dad, after all. Jacob's just lame. I mean, he's been such an idiot my whole life. I don't even know how he hasn't figured it out." I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Hearing her call me lame, an idiot, after everything I'd done for her, was like a dagger to my heart. But it was the way she called Logan dad that hurt the most. The title I'd carried with pride for 20 years, stripped away in an instant. Alistair paused the recording for a moment, giving me a chance to catch my breath. I didn't say anything, just nodded for him to continue. The next call was between Linda and Logan. My stomach churned as soon as I heard Linda's voice, soft, sultry, nothing like the way she spoke to me anymore. "You know I can't stop thinking about last time," she purred. "Are we still on for tomorrow? Same hotel?" Logan chuckled, his voice dripping with smugness. "Of course. Can't have Jacob finding out, though. Not that he ever would. The guy's so stupid. It's almost too easy. Hell, I keep him around because he's making me a fortune. Let the idiot do all the work while we enjoy the benefits." I clenched my fists so tightly my knuckles turned white. The sheer audacity of it, the disdain in his voice, the way he dismissed me like I was nothing. The call was briefly interrupted as Logan muttered something about needing to sign papers. My ears perked up. Papers? My lawyer's papers. The ones I'd sent him yesterday. The irony made me want to laugh, but there was no humor in it. The call resumed, and Logan didn't miss a beat. He continued to berate me, calling me boring, predictable, a pawn in his game. And Linda, she laughed. She laughed with him, like it was all some kind of twisted joke. When the recording ended, the room fell silent. Alistair didn't say anything. What could he say? The betrayal was laid out in brutal detail, every word another stab in the back. I sat there, staring at the recorder, the weight of it all pressing down on me. Joanna, the daughter I'd raised with love and pride, saw me as a joke. Linda, my wife of 23 years, had not only cheated but conspired against me with my best friend. And Logan, the man I trusted like a brother, had built his success on my hard work while treating me like a fool. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. The pain was there, raw and unrelenting, but beneath it was something stronger. Determination. They thought they'd won. They thought I was blind, weak, a pawn to be played. But they were wrong. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next day, I met Butch at a dimly lit bar on the edge of town. The place had an old-world charm, the kind of spot where people came to drink away their problems or seal deals best left in the shadows. Butch was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth nursing a glass of whiskey. He was a towering man, with a thick Irish accent that made his words hit harder. His reputation preceded him, both as a mobster and one of my more colorful clients. He gave me a knowing look as I slid into the booth across from him. "Jacob," he said, his voice low but steady. "I don't usually see you in places like this. What's on your mind, mate?" I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I laid it all out, the betrayal, the lies, the recordings. Butch listened intently, his expression growing darker with each word. By the time I finished, he leaned back and took a long sip of his whiskey. Logan, Linda, and even your girl Joanna? He shook his head, almost in disbelief. That's a hell of a knife they've stuck in your back. You want me to take care of it? I knew what he meant. Butch wasn't one for subtlety, and his solutions were often permanent. No, I said firmly, meeting his gaze. Killing Logan would be too kind. I want him to suffer. I want him to lose everything. His reputation, his money, his freedom. I want him to feel the weight of every lie he's ever told. Butch nodded slowly, a grin forming on his face. A man after my own heart. You're not looking for justice, you're looking for vengeance. Fair enough. What's your plan? I leaned in closer, lowering my voice as I outlined my ideas. Logan had always been careless, relying on me to keep his financials clean while he indulged in his vices. He thought his charm and connections made him untouchable. But I knew where the skeletons were buried, and I planned to dig them up. I explained how I intended to expose Logan's shady dealings to our clients and the authorities. It wouldn't just ruin his career. It would destroy the multimillion-dollar firm we built together. He'd lose his wealth, his status, and any shred of credibility he had left. Linda wasn't off the hook either. I planned to use the evidence I gathered to counter any divorce claims she might make. She wouldn't get a dime of what she thought she was entitled to. And as for Joanna, well, I had planned something special for her. Butch listened, nodding occasionally, his grin never fading. When I finished, he leaned forward, resting his massive arms on the table. You've got a solid plan, Jacob, he said, but you're gonna need help. People like Logan and Linda don't go down without a fight. If you want this done right, you'll need more than just paperwork and recordings. You'll need leverage. Leverage? I asked, raising an eyebrow. The kind that makes people squirm, he said, his grin turning almost wicked. I've got some friends who specialize in finding the kind of dirt that doesn't just ruin reputations. It burns lives to the ground. You give me the word, and I'll put them on it. I hesitated for a moment, weighing my options. This was a line I'd never crossed before, but then again, I'd never been in this position. Do it, I said finally, but make sure it's clean. I don't want anything coming back to bite me later. Butch raised his glass in a toast. To vengeance, then. The slow kind. We clinked glasses, and for the first time in days, I felt a sense of control returning. This wasn't just about getting even. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and everything they tried to take from me. Logan, Linda, Joanna. They had no idea what was coming. But soon, they'd find out. The next 2 days were a blur of calculated actions and cold precision. Every move I made was deliberate, every decision perfectly timed. The company had always been our pride and joy, or so I thought. In reality, it was just another tool for Logan to indulge his vices while I did the heavy lifting. That was about to change. Using my full access to the firm's accounts, using Logan's credentials, and the power of attorney that Logan had signed to me, I had acquired a loan of around $85 million. As soon as the money came to our account, I began orchestrating the transfer. $90 million, a staggering amount, funneled through a labyrinth of accounts, each step meticulously planned to obscure its trail. By the time it landed in its final destination, a secure account in Thailand, there was no way to trace it back to me. 5% of that went to Butch, a small price to pay for his silence and expertise. He'd connected me with the right people, the kind who didn't ask questions as long as the money flowed. Logan, meanwhile, was none the wiser. He was too busy screwing Linda in some cheap motel, convinced he had the world at his feet. The thought of them laughing at my expense, thinking they'd outsmarted me, only fueled my resolve. With the finances handled, I turned my attention to the wedding. Joanna had no idea the expenses were no longer coming from me. I shifted every payment, caterers, florists, venue costs, to the company's credit cards. As I made the changes, I couldn't help but smirk. They wanted me to pay for their betrayal, to bankroll the wedding of the daughter I'd raised only to find out she wasn't mine. Fine. I'd pay for it, but on their dime. By the time the second day ended, everything was in place. The company was drowning in debt. The wedding was fully charged to corporate accounts, and Linda and Logan were too preoccupied with their own selfish pursuits to notice the cracks forming beneath their feet. That night, I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat in the quiet of my library, letting the weight of my actions sink in. The plan was unfolding perfectly. Every move, every detail, had been carefully calculated. By the time Linda walked through the door that evening, everything was set in motion. She stumbled in, her cheeks flushed from too much wine, or perhaps from her time with Logan. The sight of her, still reeking of betrayal, made my stomach churn, but I forced myself to remain calm. There was no room for anger, no space for emotion. Not yet. Hey, Jacob, she said, her voice slightly slurred. She tried to lean in for a kiss, but I sidestepped her, feigning a smile. Busy day? I asked, keeping my tone light. She laughed, a sound that grated on my nerves now. You know how it is, she said, brushing off the question. I didn't press her. Instead, I handed her a folder containing the document I'd prepared earlier. Linda, I've been thinking, I began, my voice calm, even warm. With everything going on, the wedding, the company, it's all becoming too much for me. I feel like I'm stretched too thin. So, I've decided to simplify things. Her eyes narrowed slightly, but the alcohol had dulled her usual sharpness. Simplify? She asked. Yes, I said, sliding the document across the table. I'm transferring my share of the company to you. It's only fair, considering how much you've supported me over the years. This way, you'll have full control, and I can step back from all the stress. She blinked at me, clearly surprised. You're giving me your share? I trust you, Linda, I said, lying through my teeth. You've always been my partner, in business and in life. This just makes it official. She hesitated for a moment, looking down at the papers. Then, as if some small part of her was still trying to process what was happening, she asked, What's the catch? No catch, I replied smoothly. Just sign here, and it's done. You'll have full control, and I'll be out of the way. No more worrying about work for me. I'll focus on things that matter, like family. Her face softened at the mention of family, but I saw the greed flash in her eyes. She wanted this, needed it. The idea of being in control of a multimillion-dollar company, of having the upper hand, was too tempting for her to resist. She picked up the pen, her hand slightly unsteady, and scrawled her signature across the dotted line. Done, she said with a satisfied smile. I took the folder back, careful to keep my expression neutral. Inside, I was seething with triumph. She had no idea what she just signed. No idea that the company was now riddled with debt she couldn't possibly escape. She thought she was getting the keys to the kingdom, but all she'd inherited was a sinking ship. Thank you, Linda, I said, forcing a smile. This means a lot to me. She waved me off, clearly too drunk to think any further about it. Don't mention it. You've earned a break. I nodded, watching her as she stumbled toward the bedroom. Once she was out of sight, I exhaled slowly, the weight of the moment settling over me. This was just the beginning. The company's finances were already in chaos, and now, on paper, it was all hers. The loans, the embezzled money, the debts. She and Logan would be the ones to answer for it. As I sat in the quiet of the living room, a grim sense of satisfaction washed over me. They thought they were pulling the strings, that they were in control. But they had no idea the trap was already closing in around them. This wasn't just revenge, it was justice. They had taken everything from me, my trust, my dignity, my family. Now, I was taking it all back. The next day dawned with an eerie calm, the kind of stillness that comes before a storm. I went about my morning routine as if nothing was out of the ordinary, but inside, I was anything but calm. My plan was advancing swiftly, and today was pivotal. Linda and Logan had their usual rendezvous planned, a cheap motel that had become their haven for deceit. This time, though, it was my stage, and they were the unwitting performers. Butch had ensured the room was set up perfectly. Every angle was covered, each camera discreetly placed to capture the sordid spectacle in crystal-clear high definition. Nothing was left to chance. When they arrived, giggling like teenagers, the cameras rolled, recording every act of their betrayal. They put on quite the performance, even better than I expected. Watching the footage later would be a necessary evil, but for now, it was enough to know it existed. By the time they left, sweaty and smug, they had no idea their little escapade was immortalized. The files were securely saved and sent to Butch for safekeeping. That same evening, Joanna was out with her girls. There she met Emiliano. He was a master at his craft, a man whose charm was as lethal as a blade. Butch hired him with one goal in mind, to expose Joanna's true nature, to strip away the illusions she had so carefully crafted. Emiliano was relentless and methodical, the way he worked his charm. Within minutes, he had her hooked, flattered, intoxicated by his attention, and ready to follow him anywhere. He showed off just enough wealth to dazzle her, flashing smiles that made her heart race. By the time he led her to his bed, she was practically begging for him. The cameras hidden in the room captured everything. The way she threw herself at him, The way she abandoned every pretense of loyalty or dignity. Her moans, her sighs, her laughter. All of it recorded in high definition. The footage was damning, even more so than I had anticipated. This was no innocent mistake, no moment of weakness. It was a complete betrayal, a final confirmation of the lies I had been living with for far too long. As I sat in my library that evening, knowing both Linda and Joanna had been exposed for who they truly were, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger, yes, but also satisfaction. They had underestimated me, all of them. They thought they could play me for a fool, that I would roll over and accept their lies. But now, the evidence was mounting, the noose tightening around their necks. The day of reckoning was approaching, and when it came, there would be no escape. 2 days later, the bar smelled of stale beer and cigarette smoke, the kind of place where secrets were shared over the clink of glasses and the murmur of low voices. Butch and Alistair were already there when I arrived, the usual business partners in crime. They looked like they'd been waiting for me, their expressions unreadable but expectant. I took a seat at the worn-out table, my thoughts still whirling from the events of the past few days. Everything was falling into place, too perfectly, really, but I couldn't afford to let my guard down. There was still so much to do. "You've been busy," Butch said, pouring me a drink before I could even ask. The glass was filled with whiskey, a dark amber that seemed to mirror the thoughts swirling in my mind. He slid it across the table. "You've made some pretty big moves, Jacob. You're not just playing the game. You're rewriting the rules." I took a sip, savoring the burn as it slid down my throat. The adrenaline was still high from the night before, from watching Linda and Logan's performance in that motel room. "I'm not playing. I'm winning," I replied coolly, my eyes meeting his. Butch gave a slow nod, his lips curling into a grin. "I see that. And speaking of winning, that house deal? It went through like clockwork. The Mexican mobster is in, and you're walking away with another $3 million. I leaned back, surprised by the ease with which Butch had handled the sale. The house, the one I'd spent years building memories in, memories that had long since soured, was now gone, sold to a man whose very name sent a chill down my spine. The deal had happened quickly, thanks to Butch's connections, and the money had already made its way into my hands. I didn't expect it to go so smoothly, I admitted, my eyes narrowing slightly. "The Mexican boss, huh? How do you feel about the whole thing?" Butch chuckled, taking a long drag from his cigarette. "He was impressed. Said he liked the way you're handling this. He's got a fondness for revenge, if you catch my drift." He leaned in, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. "He's even offered to help. Said he could take out Logan, Linda, and Joanna for you. Clear the whole mess up real nice." I felt a stir in my chest, a flicker of temptation. The idea of erasing them from my life in one swift stroke, of silencing their treachery without lifting a finger, was an appealing thought. But something inside me, a quiet voice that had grown louder with each passing day, held me back. I shook my head, setting my drink down firmly on the table. "No, I don't need them dead. Not yet. I want to enjoy this. I want them to feel what they've done to me. If I let someone else handle it, it's over too soon." Butch studied me for a moment, his expression unreadable. "Fair enough. But you know, if you change your mind—" "I won't." I cut him off sharply. "This is my revenge. They'll suffer slowly, just like I did." Alistair, who had been quiet up until now, finally spoke up, his voice low but steady. "You're playing a dangerous game, Jacob, but it's your call. Just make sure you're ready for the fallout." I didn't need to hear it from him. I was already prepared for whatever came next. "I'm ready," I said, my voice firm. "And when it's all over, they'll wish they had never crossed me." Butch grinned, clearly impressed by my resolve. "Well, whatever you decide, Jacob, just know we're in this with you. But don't forget, sometimes the best revenge is letting them destroy themselves." I couldn't help but smile at that. It was true. Letting them hang themselves with their own lies, their own greed, that would be the sweetest revenge of all. And that was exactly what I planned to make them do. The wedding was just a few days away, and everything was falling into place exactly how I had planned. The bill for the wedding had already reached an absurd $2 million, and as I looked over the numbers once again, I couldn't help but smile. Every penny was well spent. The whole thing was a spectacle, a show of opulence and excess, all funded by me. But as I watched the wedding plans unfold, I knew the real show was yet to come. Linda and Joanna were busy getting ready for the big day, their excitement palpable as they prepared to leave for the destination. I had played my part well. I told them I still had some last-minute arrangements to take care of, a few final details to handle before joining them. They didn't question me. Why would they? They were too focused on the fantasy they'd built around their wedding day, too caught up in their plans to see the walls closing in. Once they were gone, I could finally begin. As soon as the door clicked shut behind them, the packers arrived. They moved quickly, efficiently, as if they had been rehearsing for this moment. The house had already been emptied of all my personal belongings, and now it was Linda and Joanna's turn. Every piece of clothing, every trinket, every photo, packed away into boxes like they were nothing but yesterday's trash. The only thing left behind was a hollow shell of the life I had once built with them. I watched as the workers carried out their boxes, the mundane task of moving everything so effortlessly. But in reality, this was no ordinary move. This was my reckoning, my final act in a long series of decisions that would forever change the course of our lives. Each box filled with their things was one step closer to my true revenge, one step closer to them realizing just how far they had pushed me. Once everything was packed and ready to go, the boxes were loaded into the trucks, destined for Logan's house. His house, where he and Linda would have to face the consequences of their betrayal, where they would have to live with the truth, day in and day out. I was making sure of it. I wanted them to look at each other across the dinner table, across the bed, and know that their dirty little secrets had been exposed. I took one last look around the house. It was almost empty now. The silence that followed was almost soothing, a stark contrast to the chaos that had defined my life for the last few months. But as I stood there, in the midst of the destruction I had carefully orchestrated, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. The game was over, and I had won. I didn't have to be there when Linda and Joanna returned to find their lives shattered. The thought of their faces when they realized what had happened, when they realized they had nothing left, not even their belongings, was enough. I didn't need to be there to see the look of panic, of realization, creeping across their faces. No, I didn't need to be there. I was already beyond them, beyond all of it. The only thing left now was to sit back and enjoy the fallout. I left the house, the last of the packers' trucks rumbling down the driveway, the sound of the engine fading as I walked away. I walked out and switched off my phone and threw the SIM card. The wedding was in a few hours. Linda and Joanna would soon realize the cost of their betrayal. And when they did, I would be waiting. Linda and Joanna had arrived at the wedding destination, their excitement palpable as they began preparing for the grand day. Joanna, the center of attention, was busy getting ready. Her dress, the makeup, the hair, all meticulously planned to ensure she looked perfect as she walked down the aisle. It was her moment, the moment she had been dreaming of for so long. Linda, her mother, was just as absorbed in the preparations, but it was clear where her focus truly lay: Logan. Linda didn't give a second thought to Jacob's absence. After all, he had made it clear that he would join them later. His sudden lack of presence didn't faze her. She was too wrapped up in her plans to worry about anything else. As far as she was concerned, everything was falling into place just as it should. Logan was here, Joanna was getting married, and soon the life she'd always dreamed of with Logan would begin. Meanwhile, Logan was already at the venue, checking over the final details of the wedding. He was the kind of man who took control, overseeing every minute aspect of the event, making sure everything was perfect. As he inspected the food, tasting the selections, checking the seating arrangements, his mind kept wandering back to one thing: Jacob. It had been over a month since he'd seen or spoken to him. Strange, Logan thought to himself as he tried calling Jacob. He let the phone ring a few times, waiting for an answer, but there was nothing. The line went straight to voicemail. He tried again, frowning. What the hell's going on? But Jacob's phone remained switched off. It was unusual. Jacob had always been the type to keep in touch, especially when it came to important matters, like a wedding. But Logan brushed it off. Maybe he's just being Jacob, he reasoned. A little distant, a little aloof, big-time idiot. Logan wasn't the kind of man to dwell on these things. He had a wedding to prepare for, and his attention quickly shifted back to the details of the day. He tasted the food one more time, ensuring the flavors were just right. His mind was occupied with the finer points, making sure everything was in its place for the grand spectacle ahead. He didn't have time to dwell on Jacob's absence, but somewhere deep down, something didn't sit right. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He had a nagging suspicion, an instinct telling him that Jacob's silence wasn't normal, but he dismissed it. After all, what could be so important that Jacob would suddenly vanish for a month without a word? It was probably nothing, he reasoned. Linda, who had been busy with last-minute touches of her own, was unaware of Logan's brief moment of hesitation. She wasn't concerned with Jacob's absence. She had made her peace with her marriage to him long ago. Now, All that mattered was that Logan was here, that their future was within reach, and that Joanna's wedding was going according to plan. As Logan went through the motions, making sure everything was perfect, his thoughts about Jacob slowly faded into the background. He was content, focused on the task at hand. He didn't know it yet, but the calm he felt now would soon be shattered. The world that he, Linda, and Joanna had carefully constructed around themselves was about to unravel in a way they never saw coming. Meanwhile, Jacob's absence, the missing pieces in the puzzle, were already set into motion. The silence spoke volumes, but the fireworks were pending. The wedding was in full swing. The guests gathered in anticipation, the music playing softly in the background, and Joanna was ready for her big moment. She stood at the back of the venue, dressed in her stunning white gown, the picture of perfection. The moment she dreamed of was finally here. But something was missing. Her father, Jacob, was nowhere to be found. Linda, bustling with last-minute instructions to the wedding staff, tried calling him. Her hands trembled as she dialed his number again, only for the call to go straight to voicemail. Again, her heart skipped a beat. Jacob had always been so reliable, so present, especially when it came to their daughter. He had never missed a single milestone in Joanna's life. Her vaccinations, her performances, her graduation. He had always been there. So why was he missing now, on the most important day of her life? Linda felt a cold rush of panic start to rise in her chest. She quickly tried to brush it off, thinking that maybe Jacob was just running late. Maybe he's stuck in traffic, she told herself. Maybe he's just having one of his moods. But deep down, she knew something wasn't right. Where's that idiot Jacob? Joanna's voice broke through Linda's thoughts, sharp and demanding. Linda turned to face her daughter. Joanna's expression was one of confusion, then frustration. She had been asking for Jacob all morning, expecting him to be by her side like he always had. But now, on her wedding day, he wasn't there. Joanna's tone was biting as she pressed. Where is that idiot Jacob? He's missing my wedding day? What the hell is going on? Linda took a deep breath, trying to maintain her composure. She couldn't let Joanna see the fear that was creeping up inside her. The crowd was beginning to whisper, noticing the absence of the father of the bride. But there was no time for panic now. This was the moment Joanna had been waiting for, the moment she would walk down the aisle to start a new chapter of her life with Logan. She took Joanna's hands in hers, her grip tight, her voice steady, though her insides churned. Forget about Jacob for now, Linda said, forcing a smile. It's not important. Logan will walk you down the aisle. Joanna blinked, clearly taken aback. What do you mean, Logan will walk me down? She asked, her voice softer now, the initial anger fading into confusion. Where's Dad? I wanted to tell him that Logan will walk me down. Linda hesitated for a moment, but then the words came out too quickly, as if she was trying to convince herself just as much as Joanna. It doesn't matter. Logan's here. You're his daughter now, Joanna. He'll give you away. The words stung, but Linda didn't let it show. She had come to terms with this, or at least tried to convince herself that she had. Come on, Linda urged, guiding her daughter toward the aisle. I am divorcing that idiot tomorrow morning, and I will move in with Logan. Forget about that idiot. Let's just focus on the wedding now. Joanna gave one last glance toward the empty space where Jacob should have been, but she said nothing more. She had waited for this day her whole life. The walk down the aisle was just a step toward her future. With a deep breath, she allowed herself to be led by Linda toward the front of the venue, where Logan stood waiting. And in that moment, Linda couldn't help but feel a knot of unease settle in her stomach. She couldn't say why, but everything about today felt wrong. As Logan held Joanna's hand and they walked down the aisle, the quiet whispers among the groom's family started to grow louder. The guests, many of whom had never seen Jacob before, glanced at one another with curiosity. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Where is the father of the bride? Who is this man walking her down? Mike, standing at the altar, was clearly surprised, his brow furrowed as he glanced at Logan. But his shock was fleeting, quickly replaced by the eager excitement of the moment. He had been waiting for this day, for Joanna to become his wife, and he wasn't about to let the oddity of the situation distract him. His eyes locked on Joanna as she neared, as if the only thing that mattered now was the woman who would soon be his. Linda stood to the side, watching the scene unfold with a tense smile. She had been so caught up in trying to keep the wedding on track that she had failed to notice the strange unease settling over the room. Something felt off, but she couldn't pinpoint what exactly. Logan and Joanna reached the altar, and with a steady hand, Logan placed Joanna's hand in Mike's, the gesture almost too smooth, too rehearsed. The guests fell silent, the ceremony progressing as planned. The minister, an elderly man with a kind face, smiled and said the usual words. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony. If anyone has any objections to this marriage, let them speak now or forever hold their peace." A brief pause hung in the air, and then, suddenly, the large screen above the altar flickered to life. At first, it was just static, but then the image cleared. The screen revealed a black background, and a distorted voice, modulated to be unrecognizable, boomed throughout the hall. "I have an objection." The voice echoed in the silent room, the words thick with both authority and a sense of menace. The guests shifted uncomfortably, confused and disoriented by the interruption. Logan's eyes darted around, trying to figure out where the voice was coming from. Joanna's face, which had been calm until now, twisted into a mix of confusion and disbelief. Linda's hand clenched at her side, her breath catching in her throat. Something about the tone of the voice, so forceful, so deliberate, felt like a warning. "What is this?" Logan growled under his breath, his eyes narrowing. He was no stranger to drama, but this was far beyond anything he had anticipated. The minister, clearly taken aback, fumbled with his words. Who is speaking?" he asked, his voice shaky. The distorted voice on the screen didn't answer directly but continued, sending waves of tension through the room. The voice on the screen cut through the tension like a knife, its words echoing in the room as the guests recoiled, stunned by the sudden turn of events. The voice, chilling and omnipotent, spoke with calculated venom. "This is the devil speaking," it said, each word dripping with malice. "And here, I have a video for the groom." The large screen flickered again, and the room fell into stunned silence as an image appeared. One that no one expected. The video that played showed Logan and Linda, clearly recorded in a motel room. The footage was graphic, explicit, and undeniable. Logan's smug, arrogant face filled the screen, while Linda, his supposed partner in life, was seen performing acts that no one in the room should ever have been privy to. The room erupted in a mix of gasps, whispers, and shocked stares. The guests, many of them family or longtime friends, were appalled. Some tried to cover their eyes, others stood frozen, unable to look away from the betrayal unraveling before them. Joanna's face turned pale, a deep flush of embarrassment sweeping across her. Her hands trembled, and her breath hitched in her throat. She had no idea at all that this was coming. Linda, who had always maintained the perfect wife facade, was now exposed for all her lies and deceit. The voice on the screen continued, unabated, its cruel tone reverberating through the church. "Like mother, like daughter," it mocked. The video changed, and now a different scene appeared. It was Joanna, in a lavish hotel room, her body entwined with a man she barely knew, the Mexican mobster Emiliano. The camera angles were intimate and revealing, and Joanna's face, contorted in pleasure and oblivion, was clearly visible in the grainy footage. The room went silent, the once lively and celebratory atmosphere now replaced with a thick, suffocating tension. Joanna's eyes widened in horror as the video continued, her hands instinctively reaching to cover her face in shame. She turned toward her mother, her voice barely a whisper, filled with both disbelief and guilt. "Mom, what is this?" But before Linda could respond, a loud, furious voice rang out from the back of the room. "That's it. That's enough." Mike, Joanna's groom-to-be, had recoiled from the altar, his face red with fury and disgust. His mother, a dignified woman with an air of control, stormed to the front, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. "Joanna!" she screamed, her voice full of venom. She slapped Joanna hard across the face, the crack of it echoing throughout the hall. The sting was sharp, but the humiliation in Joanna's eyes was even worse. "You're a disgrace," Mike's mother continued, her voice laced with fury. "You belong to the streets, not to a family. You've shamed yourself and your family. The wedding is over." Mike, now standing off to the side, had his hands raised in disbelief. His mind raced with everything he had just witnessed, his stomach churning with betrayal. Without a word, he turned and stormed out of the church, his mother following closely behind, leaving Joanna and Linda standing at the altar, humiliated and alone. The room was in chaos. People shouted, some gasped, others stood motionless, shocked by the revelations. Whispers of anger and disbelief filled the air as they began to piece together the broken images before them. Joanna, her face streaked with tears and her hands still pressed to the sting of her mother's slap, turned toward Linda. "Why, Mom? Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the din of voices. Linda, her own face red with shame and anger, stood frozen, unable to answer. The weight of everything she had done, everything she had hidden, now crashed down on her. Her betrayal of Jacob, her manipulation of Joanna, and her lies about the wedding were all laid bare before the world. The minister, who had been caught in the shock of it all, stood there, his face pale and his hands shaking. "I am so sorry," he stammered, trying to regain his composure. "But this wedding cannot proceed." With that, the congregation began to disperse, murmurs of disbelief still circulating as people left the church. Logan's smug smile was gone, replaced by a look of confusion and anger as he realized the full extent of what had just happened. His reputation, already in tatters, was now ruined beyond repair. But the damage was far from over. Jacob, sitting far away from this spectacle, knew that there is a lot more coming for them. Linda and Joanna sat together in the aftermath of the chaos, their sobs echoing through the empty church. The grand day, the one that was meant to celebrate a new chapter in Joanna's life, had been reduced to nothing but heartbreak and humiliation. Joanna's tears mixed with her mother's as they sat in silence, trying to process the whirlwind of betrayal and shame that had just unfolded. "I don't understand," Joanna whispered, her voice broken. "How could this happen? How could he do this to me, to us?" Linda didn't have an answer. She, too, was reeling, unable to comprehend the depth of the destruction. Everything had spiraled out of control so quickly. What had seemed like a perfect wedding had crumbled into nothing. She had planned so carefully for this moment, making sure everything went according to the way she wanted. And now, her entire world felt like it was crumbling. "Mom," Joanna's voice trembled. "Where's Jacob? Why isn't he here?" Linda blinked, her chest tightening at the thought of Jacob. He should have been here. He should have been fighting for his right to walk her down the aisle, proud and protective, like he always was. But instead, he was nowhere to be found. And now, Linda realized, she couldn't get in touch with him at all. She had tried calling his phone over and over again, but it remained unreachable, sending her into a spiral of anxiety. Her mind began to race as they left the church, the air outside feeling cold and unforgiving. Logan, who had walked Joanna down the aisle, was now taking them back to the house. He was driving in silence, glancing at Linda and Joanna occasionally, but no words were spoken between them. They didn't need to say anything. Everything had already been said in the videos. Linda's thoughts consumed her as they made the journey back home. Her heart was beating faster now. What if Jacob knew all along? What if he was the one who orchestrated this? The thought sent a cold shiver down her spine. Could he have planned this entire thing, watching from the shadows while she reveled in her own betrayal? No, she thought, shaking her head as if to push the thoughts away. No, he's not capable of that. Jacob, he's a pushover. He's not cruel. He wouldn't go this far. But as the thought lingered, another question crept into her mind. What if he was capable of it? What if, all this time, Jacob had been playing the long game? The manipulative, calculating revenge that had unfolded today was a masterstroke. Could he have known about Logan and her all along? Did he know about Joanna's secret? Linda swallowed hard, her breath catching in her throat. There had been signs. The way he had been distant lately, the way he'd stopped caring about the wedding and started focusing on his own affairs. Had he been plotting this for months, waiting for the right moment to strike? Was this all part of some carefully orchestrated scheme, a plan to expose her for the fraud she was? Linda's stomach turned at the thought. She couldn't bear to accept it. Jacob, her husband, the one she had manipulated for years, could he really have turned the tables on her so effectively? The silence in the car seemed to grow heavier. Joanna, still distraught, kept her head down, lost in her own thoughts, while Linda tried to focus on what was in front of her. The city lights flickered by, but all she could see was the cold, calculating expression Jacob had worn that night before everything fell apart. He hadn't said a word about his plans, and yet, his absence spoke volumes. Did he know? The thought gnawed at her as they pulled into the driveway. She couldn't stand the uncertainty. She needed answers. Where was he? Why hadn't he shown up? As Logan parked the car, Linda's hand instinctively reached for her phone again. She dialed Jacob's number one more time, but it still went straight to voicemail. Her breath hitched in her chest. Her heart pounded harder. "Mom, what's going on?" Joanna asked softly, her voice still trembling from the shock. "Why isn't Dad here?" Linda didn't answer right away. She was too lost in her thoughts. But now, as she stood in the driveway, the weight of everything pressing down on her. She realized the truth. Jacob wasn't the weak, passive man she had always believed him to be. He had played his cards quietly, meticulously, and now, she was left with the consequences of her actions. Could Jacob really have planned this all along? The doubt now consumed her. And even though she didn't want to believe it, a part of her knew that maybe, just maybe, Jacob was done being the pushover. Maybe he had been biding his time, waiting for the right moment to take everything from her. As the car rolled to a stop in the driveway, Linda's heart began to race. The sight of armed guards standing at the gates immediately threw her into a panic. She looked at Joanna, whose face mirrored her confusion and distress. The guards stood firm, their expressions unreadable as they motioned for the car to turn around. "What's going on?" Linda demanded, stepping out of the car, the fear tightening in her chest. "This is our home." The guards didn't respond, just silently blocking their path. Linda's stomach dropped as she took a step forward, her thoughts racing. She was about to argue with them, demand to know what was going on, but before she could say another word, a man in a dark suit emerged from the front door of the house. His sharp eyes and calm demeanor suggested he was no stranger to handling tense situations. Linda froze, her heart sinking as the man walked toward her. He was carrying something in his hand, a manila envelope, and his businesslike approach only deepened the sense of unease creeping up her spine. "Are you Mrs. Jacob Brown?" the man asked, his voice clipped but professional. "I am," Linda snapped, trying to hide the rising panic in her voice. "What is the meaning of this?" "This is my house and these men." The man cut her off, extending the envelope to her without a word. He watched as she hesitated, glancing back at the guards who still stood at attention. Her fingers trembled as she took the envelope from him, a knot forming in her stomach. "What's this?" Linda asked, ripping it open without waiting for a response. Inside, she found a deed of the house, with the words "property of Mr. Alejandro Lopez" clearly printed at the top. Her eyes scanned the document in disbelief. This is a mistake," she murmured, shaking her head. "This house is ours. We've lived here for years." But as her gaze moved to the bottom of the document, her hands went cold. There, in bold, official handwriting, was Jacob's signature. It was a transfer of ownership. Jacob had sold the house. She could barely breathe as she looked up from the deed, her mind spinning. No, this can't be real. Jacob would never. The lawyer's expression remained neutral, but his voice was firm. "I'm afraid this is all in order. Mr. Lopez is now the rightful owner of this property. And as of today, the house is no longer in your name, Mrs. Brown." Linda's legs felt weak. She stumbled back, holding the envelope like it was some terrible omen. The lawyer handed her one more item, another piece of paper, but this time it wasn't legal jargon. It was a letter. A letter she didn't want to open but knew she had to. She unfolded the paper slowly, the words on the page feeling like they were sinking into her skin, each one heavier than the last. The handwriting was unmistakably Jacob's. "Linda," the letter began, and Linda's breath hitched in her throat. She could almost hear his voice in the words, cold, precise, and calculated. "You must have seen that there is no dear. Well, by the time you receive this letter, I would no longer exist. You and your daughter betrayed my love and trust. So, today was the culmination of years of betrayal and humiliation. I wanted to write more, but then again, I do not want to waste my effort on you and your daughter. Screw you." Linda felt the words like a physical blow. Each sentence dug deeper into her chest, suffocating her. She stood there, staring at the letter in disbelief, the reality of Jacob's words sinking in. She had underestimated him. She had dismissed him for years, taken him for granted. Now, as the lawyer and the guards stood silently watching her, Linda realized she was completely and utterly alone. She looked up at the lawyer, her voice trembling. Where is Jacob? Is he here? What does he want?" The lawyer's expression didn't change. "I'm afraid Mr. Brown is no longer involved in any of this. I'm only here to ensure the transition of ownership is carried out smoothly, as per his instructions." Linda's legs buckled beneath her, and she collapsed onto the ground, the weight of the situation finally crushing her. This wasn't just a house being taken from her. This was everything. The family, the life she had built. All of it was falling apart, and it was all her fault. Joanna stood beside her, equally stunned, but her voice was full of anger and disbelief. "Mom, what the hell is going on? What did Dad do?" Linda couldn't answer. She only clutched the letter tighter in her hands as her world fell apart. The car ride back to Logan's house was silent, the weight of Jacob's actions still hanging heavy in the air. Linda sat slumped in the back seat, staring blankly ahead. Joanna, still in shock, hadn't said a word since they'd left the property. Logan, normally so confident and cocky, was unusually quiet as well, his brow furrowed in thought. He kept glancing at his phone, checking for any missed calls from Jacob, but the phone remained silent, the screen as empty as the space in the car. When they finally arrived at Logan's place, the quiet felt even more oppressive. Logan stepped out first, slamming the door behind him with an almost robotic motion. He walked up to the mailbox, his mind racing through the events of the day. He needed something to ground him, something to make sense of what had just happened. The mailbox was full, which wasn't entirely unusual for Logan. He pulled the stack of envelopes out and started flipping through them. Most of them were just junk mail or bills. But one envelope caught his eye. Its plain exterior and lack of a return address immediately drew his attention. He turned it over, seeing that it was addressed to him, but the handwriting was unfamiliar. Before he could inspect it further, another letter in the pile caught his eye. It was from his company. He quickly opened it and scanned the contents. His face tightened as he read the documents, which stated that Jacob was no longer associated with the company. It went into details about the termination of his shares, his withdrawal from all operations, and how his stake had been transferred to Linda. Logan's mind raced. Jacob had orchestrated this whole thing, pulling out of the company just like he had done with everything else. Logan knew Jacob's decision wasn't just about business, it was personal. Logan let out a frustrated sigh and threw the letter on the counter. There was no time to process that yet. He was too distracted by the letter without a return address. His hands shook as he tore it open. The neat handwriting on the page was unmistakably Jacob's, and the words on the paper made Logan's stomach churn. "They're your problem now. Have fun." The simplicity of the message sent a cold wave over Logan. For a moment, he just stood there, staring at the letter as if waiting for the words to somehow change. His fingers trembled as he held the letter tighter, but no matter how much he wanted to deny it, the truth of the message was undeniable. Jacob had completely turned everything over to him. Linda, Joanna, the company, the mess of debts and lies. Everything. Logan paced the room, the weight of the words sinking in. He had been right to underestimate Jacob, but now it felt like the tables had turned. Jacob wasn't just trying to ruin his life. He had set him up as the new caretaker of a sinking ship. Linda and Joanna walked in just as Logan was throwing the letter across the room. Linda's eyes were red, her expression hollow from the emotional toll the day had taken. Joanna, despite everything, still looked furious. "Logan, what is going on? What did Jacob do?" Joanna demanded, her voice cracking with the anger and confusion she was feeling. Logan looked at them both, his face a mask of frustration and helplessness. "He did exactly what we should have seen coming. He destroyed everything. He took a loan of $85 million and left us holding the bag. Now it's all on you and me." Linda let out a shaky breath and sank down on the couch. "This can't be happening. What do we do now, Logan?" Logan, still trying to process the enormity of Jacob's betrayal, just nodded, a grim expression settling on his face. Whatever he had planned, it would have to come soon. Time was running out, and Jacob's parting words echoed in his mind. "Have fun?" The tension in the room was palpable as Linda and Joanna continued to argue, their emotions raw from the events of the day. Logan stood by the door, staring at the pile of belongings that had been unceremoniously dropped off by the movers. It felt like everything was spiraling out of control, and the weight of Jacob's final moves was starting to crash down on him. Just as Logan tried to process it all, his phone buzzed with an incoming call. He picked it up, still fuming, expecting it to be another part of the mess Jacob had left behind. But as soon as he heard the voice on the other end, his blood ran cold. "Mr. Logan, I'm calling about the company credit card. It's been maxed out," the voice said, sounding slightly apologetic but also concerned. Logan frowned. "What do you mean it's maxed out? It had a $2 million limit. How can it be maxed out already?" The voice on the other end hesitated for a moment before continuing. "It was used to pay a wedding company, sir. A significant sum was charged to the card for wedding-related expenses." Logan's mind reeled. Wedding expenses? He tried to recall any such charges, but nothing came to mind. His heart began to race. Was this another one of Jacob's games? His brain quickly pieced things together. Joanna's wedding, the elaborate plans, the payments. It was Jacob. He used my own card to fund the wedding. A wedding he knew would never happen. Logan's hands trembled as the realization hit. Jacob had been planning this for weeks. Every move, every transaction, had been part of some bigger scheme to ruin me. Without thinking, Logan snapped, "How much is left on the card?" The voice on the other end hesitated, then replied, "There's nothing left, sir. In fact, the account is now in the negative." Logan's stomach dropped. He quickly ended the call and, with fury burning in his chest, pulled out his phone again. He opened the bank's app, his hands shaking as he logged in. The moment the account balance appeared on the screen, his heart stopped. The account was empty, completely drained. Logan could feel his vision blurring with anger. Jacob had taken everything, left me with nothing. The realization hit him harder than any punch ever could. His business, his money, his life, it was all gone. And now, with Linda and Joanna both still in shock, demanding answers, it felt like his entire world was collapsing around him. Joanna's voice broke through his thoughts, her anger still bubbling beneath the surface. "Logan, what are we going to do now? What about the wedding? What about everything?" Her words grated on him, but it wasn't just her words. It was her presence, the reminder that this mess was hers too. She had let him down too. His fury flared, and before he could stop himself, he lashed out. Without a second thought, Logan turned toward Joanna, his palm coming down hard across her cheek. The slap echoed in the room, sharp and brutal. Joanna stumbled back, her hand flying to her face, eyes wide in shock. Linda gasped, her eyes flashing with disbelief. "Logan, what the hell is wrong with you?" Joanna stood there, frozen, staring at him as if she couldn't comprehend what had just happened. The anger that had built up in Logan all day, all week, all month, finally boiled over, and he couldn't stop it anymore. "Do you think I'm not going through hell, too?" he shouted, his voice shaking with fury. "Everything's gone. The company's gone, the money's gone. You, both of you, are just making this worse, and you keep complaining about your damn wedding like it matters. Do you even realize what's happening to me?" Joanna didn't say anything, but the tears started to fall, not from the slap, but from the devastation in her heart. Her eyes filled with pain, but Logan wasn't sure if it was the pain of betrayal or the shock of the situation. Either way, he couldn't bring himself to care. Linda rushed over to Joanna, pulling her into a hug. "Stop it, Logan," she shouted, but Logan couldn't stop. His mind was racing, and the sense of loss was suffocating him. He stepped back, pacing the room, trying to get his bearings. What now? How do I fix this? The walls seemed to close in on him as his thoughts spiraled further out of control. He felt trapped in a nightmare of his own making. Finally, after what felt like hours of silence, Logan stopped pacing. He looked at Linda and Joanna, his expression cold and detached. "I'm done," he said, his voice low. "You can figure this out on your own. I'm out of here." Without waiting for a response, he grabbed his jacket and stormed out of the house, leaving Linda and Joanna standing in the aftermath of his outburst. The anger and devastation lingered in the air, but Logan didn't care anymore. He was done. Jacob sat back in his seat, watching the landscape below as the plane descended towards its destination. A quiet smile tugged at the corners of his lips as he thought back to the carefully executed series of moves that had led him here. After years of being a pawn in a life he had never fully chosen, he was finally in control. When he landed at Tijuana International Airport, everything had been seamless. He'd used his new identity, his carefully orchestrated plans, and a passport that wasn't his original but would serve him well enough for the new life he'd envisioned. There was no one to question him, no one to stop him. The small transactions that had led him here, transferring money, outsmarting everyone around him, felt like a final, beautiful symphony of revenge. Once he arrived in Thailand, everything else fell into place. The account had been set up, the money flowed, and as Jacob now looked at his phone screen, he marveled at the vast sum that was now his. Over $80 million. It was more than he could ever need. The numbers on the screen were a testament to his work, the culmination of a well-executed strategy that would ensure he'd never need to worry again. The small part of him that had been concerned about Linda, Joanna, or his company had long since died away. They were no longer his problem. The company was in disarray, Logan was drowning in debt, and his family had fallen apart. In a twisted way, Jacob had already been walking away from it all before today. He had planned his exit with meticulous care, and now he was free. His past was a carefully crafted story, and in Thailand, the future would be whatever he made of it. The money was already in place to secure him for life. No more manipulation, no more lies, no more being dragged down by those who had taken advantage of him. Jacob was free from the chains that had held him back, free from the people who thought they could use him. As the plane touched down, he took a deep breath, savoring the feeling of liberation. The life he had once known, his marriage, his daughter, his company, seemed like a distant memory. The world outside was now his to explore, and with his new identity and an ocean of money, he was ready for whatever came next. He smiled as the door of the plane opened. For the first time in years, Jacob felt truly alive, free in a way he had never been before. I lay there, the soft hum of the fan filling the air. My new girlfriend curled up next to me. I'd barely registered the ringing phone, so used to it by now, like a distant echo from a past life. But I saw the name flashing on the screen and knew it was Butch. I sighed, reluctantly reaching for the phone, not particularly interested in whatever new mess had emerged. Yeah? I answered, not bothering with pleasantries. Hey, Jacob, Butch's gravelly voice came through. Got some news for you. Logan's dead. Took himself out, man. Straight up hanging stuff. The bank was after him. Linda and Joanna were living with him. The whole thing, it was a mess. The bank took over his house and threw the girls out on the streets. A chuckle slipped from my lips, almost involuntary. He finally figured out he wasn't in control. Serves him right. There was a pause on the line, as if Butch was still processing the irony. Yeah, I guess you could say that. And Linda and Joanna, well, they're working at some Hooters place now. Not exactly the high life they were aiming for. Huh? I let the thought sink in, savoring the sweetness of it. Logan, gone. Linda, reduced to a life she'd never imagined. Joanna, the little princess turned. What? A waitress at a bar. My laughter bubbled up again, raw and without remorse. Good, I said flatly. That's exactly what they deserve. Butch didn't say anything for a moment. Then, with a hint of something like disbelief, he asked, You okay with all that? Why wouldn't I be? I replied, leaning back into the pillows. They had their chance. They thought they could play me for a fool. Well, now they're the ones getting played. I let the silence stretch out for a few moments, feeling nothing but satisfaction. All right, man, Butch finally said. I'll leave you to it. Just thought you should know. Thanks, I muttered, hanging up without much more thought. I turned to my girlfriend, who was still half asleep, her body warm next to mine. I tucked my phone away and pulled her closer, the weight of the past lifting off me like an old coat being discarded. I had everything I needed now. I was free. Everything else? It was just noise. I closed my eyes and settled back into the quiet comfort of the moment. Whatever they were going through didn't matter anymore. I was finally where I needed to be, and there was nothing left to regret. Then I remembered I never filed for divorce, but then again, I don't exist anymore. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.